Hey, if you're ready to turn your voice into your greatest asset, this is where you need to start. Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. If you're ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content, well, this is where we start right here at Influential Voices of Authority. It is the podcast for coaches, consultants, and experts who are ready to stop being the best kept secret and move to being that recognized, sought after authority in their niche. I'm your host, Erik K. Johnson, podcast talent coach and media expert. I've been on the radio for over 36,000 hours. I have over 575 episodes of this podcast published. And each week I sit down with industry leaders and visibility experts to uncover how they use their voice, their message, and their platform to build trust, grow their audience, and attract premium clients. So if you're ready to turn your voice into your greatest asset, let's get started. Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. You know, you don't need permission to become an authority. You don't need somebody to step up. The authority fairy's not going to show up at your door and knock and say, hey, poof, you're an authority. Authority is built through experiment. Authority is built through experimentation and not perfection. You have to try things. You can't wait until all of the lights are green before you put your foot on the gas pedal. You're never going to get started. You need to try things. You need to iterate. You need to change it up. Just make adjustments and try again. You know, if you're like many professionals that I coach, a lot of experts come into my space. I'm sure you've probably thought, man, who am I to teach this? You have that little voice in your head saying, who are you? How do you know so much that you're allowed to teach Mr. Smarty Pants? And I know that little voice is in your head. It's been in my head before as well. You're probably thinking things like, these people know more than I do. Who am I to step up and teach? Or maybe I should wait until I have more experience, another certification, until I've successfully done A, B, or C. Maybe you just need another success story. Maybe you just need another few years of experience. Well, what you really need to do is just try things, because we all run into that little voice in our head, but that little voice in our head is wrong. You already know everything you need to know to lead. You just need to know enough to help somebody else achieve what you've achieved. Somebody else who happens to be a few steps behind you. And when you can help that person get to where you are, you know enough to teach, you know enough to guide, you know enough to mentor. Now you just need to get started. And sometimes the most compelling authority, the one that connects the most, isn't the guru at the mountaintop. It's not the guru standing at the very top saying, hey, look at what I know. Look how good I am. Look at all of I've accomplished. It's the guy climbing the mountain a few steps ahead saying, I'm figuring this out. I've already figured out those steps. Come step with me. Come climb with me. I'll show you the way. And that's what Tom Hazzard did. And that's why I've invited him on the show today. As you listen to my conversation with Tom, he didn't proclaim himself a 3D printing expert. He documented his journey along the way. He experimented. He learned as he went. And then he shared what he learned. And by doing that, he attracted people to him. Eventually, the marketplace decided he was the authority. Tom Hazzard didn't start his first podcast because he was the world's leading expert in 3D printing. He started the podcast because he was curious. He was learning, and he believed other people could benefit from what he was discovering along the way. And what happened next is the lesson I want you to take away from today's conversation. His podcast on 3D printing, talk about niche podcast. The podcast eventually grew to more than 100,000 recurring listeners. Month after month, 100,000 downloads, generated hundreds of episodes of this podcast. He created tremendous search visibility just by the way he was doing it. And ultimately, this podcast helped Tom discover an entirely new business that he launched, because he experimented some more. He didn't wait until he had authority to start the podcast. The podcast helped him become the authority. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today in my conversation with him. As a top influencer, as a top influence strategist for speakers, authors, and experts, Tom Hazzard has been in major publications. He's helped sports stars and entrepreneurial influencers brandcast their original messages via podcasting and video casting. His latest business venture is called Poditize. It reinvents podcast hosting, advertising, and brand marketing with an obsessive podcaster centric focused on solutions to get hosts seen, heard, found, and rewarded in our noisy digital world. Tom co hosts multiple top ranked podcasts with over 2,000 episodes combined. These include Feed Your Brand, Product Launch Hazards for Inventors and E-Sellers, and WTFFF 3D Printing, the 3D Start Point. I've invited Tom on the show today to talk about how experiment and consistency creates momentum when building your authority. So enjoy my conversation with Tom Hazzard. Tom, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your journey, how you got into podcasting. Tell me a little bit about your first show that you launched.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that's a interesting story. My earlier part of my career was in product design and development for retail. So things that you would buy at, Costco, Sam's Club, at that time, the office supply superstores were still big, like Staples and Office Max, Office Depot. Did a lot of
Before
products through
Amazon
those.
took over everything.
Right, it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
right.
before. I mean,
Yeah.
really in the, mid 90s through to about 2013, 14. And so in product design and development, consumer products, I mean, you probably bought some of my stuff, but you would never know it because it was always like we're ghost designer for a brand, right? So the brand
Okay.
would be the one that gets recognition. But still did that a lot. And um, around 2010, 11, 12, there was a whole series of patents that expired around 3D printing, and then this industry emerged called desktop 3D printing. And you may remember, I mean, it's still a thing today, but it was really big in the news back in like 2012, 13, 14, 15, and there. Well, we used 3D printing in our product design and development. My wife and I, who she's my business partner, and we um, we were learning about these desktop 3D printers, realizing, wow, we really need to get one to, level up our game in our industry. And as we did it, we were really shocked at not only how challenging it was to do it well. You had to become a technician. I mean, we're designers, product developers, but you had to really be a technician to use a 3D printer. And we could see this opportunity gap that existed. And we thought, you know what? Maybe we should start a podcast. Not that we're the best people and experts in 3D printing, but we're going on this journey of learning how to do it well, and use it. And why don't we share that and help people, help bring people along and help them jump the learning curve was the idea. So we started this podcast, and actually before we did it, did a lot of research on how to even start a podcast because we were podcast listeners, had never started one, but that's a whole nother story. But we started a podcast called WTFFF, 3D Printing Podcast. And the idea behind that name, it's not what you think it might be, because desktop 3D printing, one of the technical terms for that is fused filament fabrication, or at least one of the major methods of 3D printing is called that. So, what the fused filament fabrication? But it was a nice play on words. It got people's attention. It was catchy. Um, And so that's why and what we started talking about and did it for, gosh, I think about 5, 6 years.
Wow. So just sharing your journey through 3D printing?
And then we took it upon ourselves to sort of own it and be a resource. We started a website called 3dstartpoint.com, which still exists today, actually. We don't actively publish the podcast, but that website is still a resource for people learning about 3D printing. And we turned our podcast content into written content for the website. It became an SEO powerhouse. And we then did more than just taking people on our journey. We decided, well, we would get new 3D printers in and review them and report on them to our community. And um, same thing with other tools or software or 3D models. You might print all sorts of things. And we actually thought we might want to turn that into a career. And the podcast and the website was kind of a testing ground, an experiment to see, can we turn this area of interest that was tangent to what our business was into its own business
How fast did the podcast grow?
very quickly. Within about 3 months to 4 months, we actually got written up in Forbes magazine for having one of the fastest growing podcasts. We
Wow.
had gone from zero to about 30,000 listeners, not just like downloads in a month type of thing, but actual listeners in just a few months. So and then it continued to build. We in its heyday we had over 100,000 recurring listeners on a regular basis and had sponsors for the show and all sorts of things.
When it grew that fast for you, what was not having known anything about podcasting other than being a listener, and you launched like, well, let's give it a try. When you saw it take off that fast, what was that like for you?
Well, it was really just a fun experience for us. And we were learning new things all the time, learning things about podcasting, learning things about 3D printing that we never expected. And one of the things, well, I guess to be fair, this wouldn't have been at the very beginning, but as we went on the journey and we had 75 episodes and then over 100 episodes and we got to the point where we had literally 650 episodes of this show that we published before we stopped it. um
Over what span of time?
mm, so started it in 2015, May-ish time for, no, maybe even earlier in 2015, I believe. And then we stopped publishing somewhere right around 2020,
Wow.
2021, somewhere in
So
there.
5 or 6 years,
Mhm.
that many episodes. That's impressive.
Well, when we started, we, well, I think I mentioned we spent a lot of time researching podcasting, and we decided if we're going to do this, we're really going to do it.
Yeah.
And we recorded a lot of episodes before we launched. We launched with 25 on day one,
Oh,
and
geez.
then we published every weekday for a couple of years before we dialed it back to fewer episodes a week.
Okay.
And that's why we got so many episodes in a short period of time. It's also, I'm sure, part of why we succeeded maybe faster than other shows did because we're providing a lot of content on a daily basis, or at least
Yeah,
weekday
you're getting
basis.
listeners every day on a
Yeah.
daily basis. That's so then what happens in 2020 or 2021 where you're out of the 3D printing game, and when does your current show how does that transition happen?
Well, it actually started before we ended WTFFF. I mean, we stopped it to answer part of your question because our interests were changing.
Okay.
And just as individuals, we felt like we had given this a good run. And I mean, don't get me wrong, lots of wonderful things have happened in the 3D printing industry. I've still got three 3D printers that I use in general for fun. And in fact, in the current business, are you familiar with a mic flag? I'm sure you are. You know what that
Yes.
is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mic flag that
So,
goes on your mic has a little logo on it so people know that what station you're from or the name of your podcast or
right. So, in our business around podcasting, we um, often would provide a microphone to new customers that were going to launch a show, and we 3D printed our own mic flag that was an attachment that would go on the mic, and did it where, you would slide in really what is a printed logo of your show on like a 4x6 glossy photo printer type of paper, and cut
yeah.
it out and slide it in rather than print on it, because it's easier. Pretty much anybody can print on a normal, photo paper like that and get your logo on it. So anyway, we designed and 3D printed these mic flags for the podcast business. But yeah, our interest changed, and really as we went on this journey, we got that lots of things were changing in product design and development. So much offshore development. I mean, Tracy and I each, every month, one of us would be in China
Oh,
for
geez.
a week or two every month. We would alternate because we were in business together doing product design and development. And,
Yeah.
if you produce things there, you have to travel there a lot. Well, there was a lot of retail consolidation. The office supply superstores, which was one of the places we sold a lot of products. They were getting eaten up by Amazon, and people are buying less at retail. So a lot of things are changing, and our interests really became more in podcasting, which we didn't really intend, than it was product design and development. So that's sort of why we wound that down and stopped the podcast, and in no small part because of our interest in podcasting too.
So what's the new show called and how did we launch that one?
So we have a couple of shows. We have Feed Your Brand, which is, meant to be a podcast about podcasting for podcasters to help them along. We have another one called The Binge Factor, which is mostly stories about top podcasters and what made their show successful. They're all really for the community of podcasters, and we're actually rebranding and redesigning each of those shows right now. They may have a little bit different names going forward, although we haven't completely settled on it. But um, yeah, we just felt like as we were getting into this industry, which by the way started as an experiment, even as a business, we always sort of do a design of experiment and test things first and see if there's a market before we really jump into it. That we should practice what we preach, and we enjoyed podcasting. But over the years, one of us, at least, if not both of us, have started a new podcast every year so that we're always experiencing what's working today and
Oh,
not
that's
just what
great.
worked 10 or 12 years ago.
Which of these two have been around longer?
Feed Your Brand, I'm pretty sure, has been around
Feed your brand.
longer.
Okay.
The Binge Factor, I mean, they're different shows, but we've done other shows that have nothing to do. I mean, while those two were running, we've had other shows. I mean, I did one that I was kind of what would you call it? A sidekick, if anything, on it with another podcaster, which was about language and communication. That doesn't sound exciting, but it was a lot of fun. It was called Purchasing Truth. Tracy did one on cryptocurrency and blockchain with another co-host. I mean, we have areas of interest, and when we have one and think, well, there's a story to tell there, or there are lots of stories to tell there, and might be a audience for it, we start a podcast.
So when it comes to building your authority in the podcast space, you have two podcasts, both of them targeted toward the podcasting community. Um, when it comes to building your authority, how do you use each of those podcasts differently? And how do they help you build authority in the space?
That's a really good question. And, it's different for each of those two shows because they're not the same. The Binge Factor was exclusively an interview show, and Tracy did it alone. We're not co hosts on it. And so there's a certain authority that comes from being that host. And I mean, like a lot of people hope they're going to do when they have guests, that the guests are going to share it and, raise awareness with other people. And that certainly does work organically to an extent. Feed Your Brand was very different because it's just me and Tracy, and we rarely, if ever, had a guest. I mean, once in a while, we did establish a few people that were occasional recurring contributors, if you will, but not, well, I guess technically they are guests, but mostly it's just the two of us talking about a relevant topic that should be of interest to anyone in podcasting. And that show actually, in many ways, got a lot more listenership and a lot more following. And we would record those episodes live with an audience, private audience on Zoom of our community of podcasters we're supporting, and also live streamed it to YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and I guess everywhere else you can do that with. So it was a different kind of a show. Now, the authority comes from lots of places, to answer that part of your question. I mean, obviously, there's association and credibility with guests who hopefully will share it. And we took that to new levels, at least as we started podcasting in 2014, 15, where we created so much social media share assets for a guest and would email them all those the day that it published and stroke their ego with some of it, quite honestly. We have a graphic we call ego bait, which we don't really tell the guests that, but that's what we call it internally. So we're, lifting a quote of something one of us, the host or one of the hosts, said about the guest, and then that makes them look really good, something flattering. And when they get that graphic, they almost always share it. It's like, wow, look what Tom said about me, or look what WTFFF said about me, or Feed Your Brand, or whatever show it is. And when you be shocked at how easy it is, you don't even really have to ask a guest to share it on social media, unless there's somebody that's sort of old school and just doesn't engage in social media. They have this graphic, they're going to share it and say, look what they said about me. But that graphic also had our show logo and information on it. So anybody who saw it learned about the show. So that's one way you can develop organic authority, is helping other people share your stuff and share it with people they know, and comment on the episode that they should go listen to it. But there is a much bigger, more long tail authority that we adopted very early on just for our own podcast, WTFFF, that we still do to this day for ourselves and any podcast that we support. And that is creating a very comprehensive long form blog post. I'd think of it as an episode landing page for every episode of the show that extracts all of the value in what was said, converting it to a written word. And it's not, I mean, everybody knows, hey, you can get a transcript of your episode. Okay, yes, true. But it wasn't just a transcript, and it never said Tom Cullen said this, Tracy Cullen said that, the guest name said that. We had a process where we would convert what was said into a written form, use all the words that were spoken, and not sanitize it from that human spoken language, that sort of plain spoken, not washed obviously through AI back when we started, because you didn't have it then, but um, extracting all that value because it had tremendous long-term SEO value for your website. And, when I mentioned 3dstartpoint.com, became a powerhouse website. I mean, in terms of keyword rankings and free traffic from Google every day, that's a whole nother level of authority. Whether you're doing 3D printing podcast, or you're a speaker, author, thought leader, just trying to elevate your own personal brand, you want to be an author, you want to speak from the stage. So that was essential for us and worked incredibly well, and also grows your listening audience too, because anybody who Googles anything and finds one of your blogs on the website sees you have a podcast, and they can play it right there.
Hey, before we get back to my conversation with Tom, I want to highlight something important from his story here. Tom didn't start his first podcast because he already had the authority in 3D printing. He started because he was learning, experimenting, and sharing what he discovered along the way. And eventually something changed. The podcast itself became proof of his authority. That's what I want you to think about with your show. When someone discovers your podcast, does it demonstrate why they should trust you? Does it clearly communicate what you stand for? Does it showcase your unique perspective and your position as the brand that they should trust? Or does it position you as the person they should come to when they need help? Or are you simply publishing another episode every week? Because there's a big difference between having a podcast and building an authority platform. And that's exactly why I created the Podcast Authority Audit. I'll evaluate your show, I'll evaluate your messaging, your positioning, and your storytelling to see how effectively you're using your voice to become that recognized authority in your space. You don't need to wait until people call you an authority. You can intentionally build it. And you can discover how with my Podcast Authority Audit. If you'd like my eyes and ears on your show, head over to podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. You can apply for your Podcast Authority Audit right there today. And let me help you find the authority gaps in your show today. That's podcasttalentcoach.com/authority. Now let's get back to my conversation with Tom Hazzard. In some of the services that you guys offer, you do a lot of that stuff for your clients in terms of creating those assets. How did that come about? Did somebody ask you to, man, what you're doing for your stuff looks great. Can you do that for me? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I'll tell you, it was a surprise. Now, at when we started WTFFF and it became successful, and we were, I mentioned, written up in Forbes, and there were other articles too, we very quickly got a reputation among our own circles of influence. And we were, business owners. We would, like any business owner, trying to constantly educate ourselves more and research what are the best ways to do business, to market your business, to, all sorts of things. And so we would attend events, in-person events that are around that. And, people would learn, oh, we have a podcast, and then they would check it out. So people would come up to us at these events. And I literally had this happen in Los Angeles at one of the LAX airport hotels. It wasn't all that glamorous, but it was an event at that hotel, and it was near the airport because people came from all over the country to this event, and they didn't have to go far once they landed to attend, right? Just take a cab or, maybe an Uber. So at this particular event, word gets around quick, and all of a sudden somebody introduces me to this podcaster. His name is Mitch, and Mitch asked me about what we're doing, and I showed him on our own show. He said, "That's great. I need that. I have a podcast. Can you do that for me?" And literally hands me a credit card in my hand. Here, charge my credit card. He really didn't. I mean, I'm sure he did at some level, would have cared how much he spent, but he really didn't. He was willing to spend what it took to advance himself and get more out of his podcast. So I didn't end up charging him that day. I mean, I wrote down the number, and then we did business a day or two after the event. But it literally, people come up to you at events and like, I need this. This is great. So word of mouth, referrals, reputation, very quickly um, became an experiment. Though I mean, it was still we thought at first, all right, I'm spending all this money on WTFFF, and I had hired individual people to do all the things we wanted them to do. And it was a lot. I mean, it was costing us probably a few $1,000s a month back then because we were doing so many episodes. And I thought, well, a few other people want us to do the same thing for them. I can leverage these same resources across more shows and actually save myself a little money, not spend as much out of my own pocket and have them subsidize part of the expense. So it was an
Yeah.
experiment like that. But eventually, when you had a dozen people on the team and probably 20 plus podcasts you were helping, I said to Tracy, I think this is a business here on its own. And
Looks like it. People are paying us money.
yeah, she didn't want to do it at first. She's like, "Why do you want to distract us? We're product designers, we're artists, we're commercial artists, we do all this stuff." Okay, but there's design and creativity in podcasting too. We're really enjoying it, and I sort of felt like if we don't do it, what kind of entrepreneurs are we? I felt like we almost owed it to ourselves to go down this road and see where it took us. And so we sort of divided efforts for a while, both podcasting, but Tracy focused more on the product business. I focused more on the podcast business. And eventually it took over and we stopped product design and development altogether.
I love the
So,
way you kind of experiment with stuff. Like let's just try it, see if it works. Let's give it a whirl. And I think far too many people spend way too much time planning and
mm,
preparing rather than just launching and then reiterating as you go after you evaluate. So the part of your business that I find fascinating is the marketing piece because you have launched all this stuff and you're creating these great assets for clients. Tell me how the marketing service came about. How did that develop?
that developed through long, hard trial and error, quite honestly, over
More
years.
experimentation. I
Yeah,
love it.
more experimentation. I mean, that Tracy and I are always, our whole careers have been about assessing market proof. Will the dogs eat the dog food is one cliche expression, right? And you can develop this formula for years trying to tweak it and make it perfect, but until you put that dog and food in front of the dogs, if they don't eat it, it does not matter. You just wasted a lot of time. So we had been working on lots of different ways to grow a podcast audience more than just organically. We felt like we'd mastered the organic path and it's very useful and valuable. I mean, the long tail stuff still works. If you're in it for the long haul, you need to do all these sorts of things in order to succeed. But not every show is going to get five figures of downloads a month, let alone listeners a month, right? There are wonderful shows that get several hundred to several thousand listeners. And I still think that's wonderful. I'd rather you have that and have a raving audience coming back every time, even if it's small, than have a huge audience. But still, there are an awful lot of podcasters that are not satisfied and get discouraged and depressed. And I'm sure you've heard all the statistics of how many episodes a typical podcast that does not succeed will get through. There's a few points in the journey. It's usually, I think, 7, 11, or like 21 are like some of the early benchmarks. And people usually quit after 7, 11, or 21. If you get to 25, chances are you're going to continue it for a couple of years at least. So what we've experienced when people have a taste of success, they get some recognition, they get more listenership, they hear from those listeners, they reach out to them, they ask questions, they double down and do more of it. So, how can we help them grow audiences? Yes, and build authority and get more credit for all this hard work they're putting into it, regardless of how much money they're spending on it or if they're doing it themselves or not. So we tried many things, different kinds of advertising tactics that failed over the years. We've tried everything. We've done Facebook ads and Instagram ads and LinkedIn ads and all sorts of different programs, newsletter programs. And, there are lots of good things in there to do. And I want to be clear to your listeners, I'm not knocking all those efforts. Depends on your business, your budget, what you're doing. But how can we create a lower cost marketing program that's going to be measurable and effective and measurable in its success? So tried a few other things that did not work or were a little more long tail, but most recently in the last 18 months had a new concept, tested it out, And by the beginning of 2026, it had proven itself enough that we really start opening it up to any podcast that wants to do it because it was scalable. Um, and it really has to do with have we curated a network through partners. We didn't build all this from the ground up. It is our concept, and we're the only company doing it. But we curated a network of more than 2,000 mobile phone apps that anybody who has a smartphone, which is pretty much anybody today, probably has 10 or 20 of these apps on their phone that they use periodically for something, whether it's a travel app or it's a weather app or it's a news app or some other utility, a stock watch app, a game app. So it doesn't matter. They're all over the map, but they're the kind of apps people must watch or listen to an ad periodically in order to use it for free. You're trading having a free app you don't have to pay for, having to spend a little time viewing those things. Well, we've been able to advertise podcasts in that venue very inexpensively. And we even tried that early on and in different kinds of ads, but finally dialed in what's the real right way to do it. We advertise something specific about your show that actually gets people to click and listen to an episode, or at least start to. So the conversion to, from ad plays to listeners is meaningful to the point where any show, and I'm going to say a caveat here, as long as you're publishing consistently and on a regular basis. If you're trying to breathe life into an old show that you haven't published an episode in months or years, don't bother doing this because it's not going to help you. The bare minimum I will even agree to provide this service to a podcaster is you've got to be at minimum publishing every other week, but we really strongly recommend weekly in order to get the best return on this. It'll work with every other week, but it takes longer to work. And then there are obviously those that publish more than once a week, and that's even better. But it works incredibly well once per week to drive listeners people who were not aware of your show to be aware of it. And when they push it, they instantly start playing it through Apple, which is what we're doing intentionally. And there are reasons why we do that. But you definitely see month over month significant measurable growth in listenership and authority because of Apple and being unique. Still, I don't know what you've experienced, Erik, but with all the shows we support, Apple is the number one listening app percentage wise of all the shows that we support. It varies in percentage, but it's always the dominant one.
Yeah, when I look at my stats, it's typically Apple and the clients that I work with. Some double down, some of them have Spotify up there, but that's because they're they're doubling down inside of Spotify or advertising inside of other shows that are on Spotify, or they focus on promoting their show there. But for those that are just platform agnostic when they promote, Apple is by far and away where I see most of that. Where can people find information on that marketing platform?
So they would go to podcastersunited.org is our website. And it's actually, well, by the time you're at this should be okay, but it's undergoing a little revisions. But it's called the Audience Accelerator is what we call it. And that's where they can learn more about it. They can also reach out to us. We actually have a phone number in the footer of our website that, it's sort of one of my
That's
pet peeves.
crazy. You
I
can
don't
use the
like,
phone app on your phone.
how about that? I mean, I don't like having a business without, or I don't like actually giving business to a business who has a website without a phone number on it. I feel like if you've got a problem, you should be able to call and get someone. Maybe that's old school, but anyway, there's a phone number. There's also a contact form. People can reach out. But yeah, it's a really wonderful program, making a big difference for a lot of podcasters. And like I said, when they get some success, they feel better and are willing to record more content, which is what really is heartening for us because Podcasters United is meant to be a community to support podcasters to be more successful. So we want to
Well,
see everybody who wants to do it succeed.
I love the website. Podcasters United has such great resources over there for a lot of podcasters to get their hands on. If you were to recommend one resource over at podcastersunited.org, which one should we go grab first?
Yeah, so it's really and by the way, this is completely free, is we have a tip library there. So whether you are a newbie considering starting a podcast, or you've just started one recently, or even somebody who has quite a bit of experience in it, there is something there for each of you, and a lot of helpful resources to just help you achieve your goals through podcasting, maybe learn some potential pitfalls you weren't aware of, or um, learn from others who've gone through it. I will agree, things are changing all the time. There's always new things to learn, but there's a lot of good resources there for you.
Fantastic. You can find that over at podcastersunited.org. That link's in the show notes. I'll also put it at podcasttalentcoach.com/tip library, and that'll take you straight to it as well. Tom, it's great to have you on the show. You're a wealth of knowledge. I love your stories. I love your journey. And I love the way that you just experiment with everything along the way to find what works and then openly share it with everybody so they can use it as well. So thanks for being here and thanks for sharing your time with us.
My great pleasure. Thanks, Erik.
Hey, big thanks to Tom Hazzard for joining us on the show today. Make sure you get over and get his free resource, his Podcasters United tip library. It's a fantastic resource for new and experienced podcasters so you can make progress toward your goals. It's all completely free. I put the link at podcasttalentcoach.com/tip library, TIP library, podcasttalentcoach.com/tip library. Hey, thanks to Tom. Don't wait until you have the authority to start using your voice to build your position in your space. Experiment, iterate, change it up, try it again, and do it over. Just keep rinsing and repeating. That's the way you're going to build your authority. You have to get started. You have to take that first step. You can't wait until all the stoplights are green before you put your foot on the gas pedal. You have to start today. Try things, change it up, and try it again. That Podcasters United tip library will help you out. It's at podcasttalentcoach.com/tip library. The other thing that will help you out is my podcast authority audit, because you're using your voice to build your authority. You've published all the episodes. You've stayed consistent. But unfortunately, the business isn't coming. It's not growing your business. People are listening, but they don't take action. It's not creating the level of influence and opportunity that you thought it would. Well, here's your chance to fix all of that, because the truth of the matter is consistency alone doesn't create authority. Intentional leadership does. And so if you're ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content, if you'd like to move from being that best kept secret to that recognized, sought after authority in your space, let me audit your podcast and discover all of the gaps. I will show you exactly where to look. And more importantly, I'll show you how to fix those gaps. This isn't just I'll point out the problem and tell you good luck with it. I deep dive into an episode and I create a 15-point report that you and I sit down and we go over so we can identify the exact gaps in your podcast, the ones that are holding you back from getting more business, and I'll show you how to fix those. You can head over to podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. All of the details are right there. I've created a video for you. It'll show you exactly how the podcast authority audit works. That's at podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. We will uncover your authority positioning gaps. We're going to develop a plan that will help you close those gaps and help you succeed. And then I'll show you how I can help and support you to reach your podcast goals. It's over at podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. Hey, thanks again for being here this week. It's always great to see you. I appreciate the time you give me each and every week. I can't wait until we do it again next time. But until then, remember to step into your authority, and we'll see you on the next episode.